The education you get by taking the 107 license is so critical to the way that you fly and the way that you are a steward of this technology, and then going a step further and becoming a steward for the environment.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 132. Is there a correct way to view whales and other marine life with a drone? Today's guest believes there is, and she's making it her mission to spread the word. Alicia Amerson is a marine biologist, drone pilot and instructor, and marine conservation and policy consultant. She is also the founder of AliMoSphere, a startup company dedicated to protecting our ocean heritage with science, partnerships, and technology. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Alicia talks about efforts to educate pilots on how best to fly drones so as not to disturb or cause harm to natural wildlife. She also talks about the beneficial applications of drones in studying and collecting data on marine wildlife. And she'll talk about the highest cause of mortality for biologists in the field and how drones can reduce that risk. Now, before we hear from Alicia, if you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting my funding campaign on patreon.com. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show. Now let's hear how we should be flying our drones around marine wildlife with Alicia Amerson. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Alicia to introduce herself.
I'm Alicia Amerson, and I work for AliMoSphere, a company that I started earlier this year in 2017, and we're focused on drones, women, and ocean conservation work.
Alicia, tell us about your company, AliMoSphere. What's its mission?
Basically, we want to develop best practices, working with the government, NGOs, commercial stakeholders to do outreach and education for pilots around the world. And so it's an integration of ocean protection, so protecting our ocean heritage by building communities and opportunities that are focused on scientific investigations and built on conservation partnerships so that we can advance technology and also artistic creativity so that we can produce messages that are focused on doing good in our world.
Where did the idea for starting the company come from? Did you always have an interest in marine science?
As a child, I was really interested in working in marine biology, but I grew up in New Mexico, so I didn't get to see a lot of whales. And as an adult, I started traveling a lot and I started seeing pollution on beaches. So I contacted a professor at Scripps Institution of Oceanography to see if there was a graduate program that would fit my needs and interest. And I was accepted a year later and decided to look at the best practices of whale watching along the gray whale migration, which is from Canada, all the way from Alaska through Canada, down Washington, Oregon, California, and into these lagoons in Baja de California, Mexico. While I was conducting that research, I did not see any drones, and this was only 2 years ago, except for on one trip, I saw this really crazy seagull, and when I pulled up the camera, I noticed that it was not a seagull, it was a drone, and it was literally right over the top of a gray whale, and it looked like another whale watching boat was flying it, and you could see the people, and I still have that image that I snapped today from that trip, and I had no idea at that point in time that I would integrate drones into an ecotourism, into a science and policy career. And so that's where this has all started and how I got here.
What's the connection between drones and marine mammals?
One of the things that we're challenged in marine biology is that we have regulations that protect marine mammals in the United States, all marine mammals. So it's polar bears all the way down to dolphins or even seals and sea lions. basically you're not allowed to take an animal, and that means like you're not allowed to harass it or kill it. So in the space of drones, the regulations came out before drones were ever invented. And so there are also, within the regulatory body, it talks about aircraft, and it talks about how in certain national marine sanctuaries there are overflight zones, and these are protected areas for rookeries, for seals and sea lions, that you can't fly below 1,000 feet altitude. And so what we want to do is communicate with people that right now NOAA is saying, because of this specific regulation that is in only parts of national marine sanctuaries, they're saying, hey, let's just use that rule, and across the board, we're not going to fly above marine wildlife or marine mammals. But the thing is, it's really unclear, because you can fly above them without any type of fine or enforcement as long as you're not harassing the animal outside of these overflight zones. And so literally, unless there's like some other regulation or some other restricted area for military use or airport, one could technically fly over an animal as long as it was not being harassed. So that's what our education is based off of.
How do we know when our flying of a drone is affecting a marine mammal?
There are indications of avoidance behavior. And so what we're doing now at AliMoSphere is we're taking the known avoidance behavior of marine mammals that's in scientific publications, so peer-reviewed journals that are of scientists using these and explaining that they have maybe seen this type of avoidance behavior maybe in a seal, which it could be anything from the animal looking at the drone. Like Dr. N. Kerr, he went and flew over 400 animals, large whales, to see if he could get avoidance behavior or to see what the avoidance behavior was. And out of 400 animals, he only saw 20 of them even look up at the drone. So it is known that larger whales probably don't even realize the drone is above them. But if you start looking at sea lions and seals, they have to use the coastline for pupping season and to thermoregulate. So they can't stay in the water all the time. They need to come out of the water, and they use the sun to basically heat up their body. And they also need it to pup. So a mom needs a certain amount of time to bond with her pup once she's given birth. And also, beyond marine mammals, we also have issues with seabirds. So there are some seabirds that nest up on seaside cliffs and literally lay eggs are just hanging on the cliff right there. So when you flush the birds, same as if you flush the seals, they could knock that egg loose and it would fall. And so we would lose generations of eggs in a population due to drone use. So it's these coastal areas where the humans and the animals are easily accessible to each other that really need protection. And those avoidance behaviors are what we've built our best practices on. So one thing that we've done this year to address this is build best practices to, one, based on the science, based on the unknown avoidance behavior. And then now we're ready to start talking about what can people do beyond not flying over these animals, but if by chance you are flying in an area where there are animals, what can you do to ensure that you're not causing disturbance?
So if a drone operator happens to find themselves flying over a marine mammal, what should they keep in mind?
Well, if you see animals along the coastline, the best rule of thumb is do not fly over them. And then if you happen to be flying and a bird comes up, or you happen to be flying and you don't realize, because one of the best things about the tool itself is that you can reach an accessible habitat. And that's really useful for researchers. But then that could also mean that other people could also see inaccessible habitat. So you might run across a stranded sea lion in your drone, like a pup that was stranded, and you could use the details from your drone to call into a stranding hotline to say, hey, there's a young sea lion or a young pup, and we saw it with our drone. So, but if you do come across animals, one, just don't fly over them. If you are flying over them, make a strong commitment that you're not flying low so that you are well above a line that is going to cause any type of reaction. If you see them making any type of looking or noticing the drone, you've already disturbed them. So literally not making fast moves. One of the scientific researchers in NOAA up in Alaska who uses this tool for research on stellar sea lions and fur seals mentioned that if they start to notice it, if they've made fast moves with the drone, either going up or to the side, it's flushed the beach. So do not make sudden moves. Try to change your altitude slowly and try to maneuver slowly as possible.
Take us back to when you first saw a drone in the marine setting.
So the first time I saw a drone was during my whale watching study. And I thought it was interesting because I had personally wanted to use drones for my study, but I knew that regulations on it were not clear. And I didn't know how to integrate it safely, and there wasn't a lot of information out there about how do we do this safely. And that's why we're focusing on these best practices now, because there isn't really anything out there saying how to do this safely if you are out there.
Did that experience spur you on to using drones yourself?
Well, I had already the understanding from a lot of scientists that I was working with that literally there wasn't a lot of support for using drones. In this one whale watching company that was using it, it wasn't necessarily looked at highly or with much regard. And so I think that people were interested in it, but there wasn't enough information on how to do this safely or what would cause an avoidance behavior or disturbance to the animal. So I literally did not do that for my study. But then a couple months later, I called one of my friends in Australia to ask him what he was doing because I had finished my degree. And he said flying drones over whales to collect body condition data. So to understand how much fat is lost from a mom when she's nursing a calf. And I thought, well, that's great. Can I come join you? And he said yes. So 2 weeks later, I flew to Australia, where I was a research assistant working with Frederick Christensen from Murdoch University. And since then, he has expanded his reach to gray whales and right whales. And I helped on a second season with collecting data in South Australia over right whales. And so the idea of creating the best practices for conservation use, or just for conservation in general, came because I worked with him. I knew the issue was that there isn't any information out there on how to do it right, and we need that information. And working with him, I was able to see how he cautiously approached the animals, how he thought about the permitting, how he thought about the application itself. And he's even measured acoustic disturbance, altitude disturbance. So we were looking at all of these things on how do we use this tool for conservation. And one season we flew from a boat, where the other season we flew off seaside cliffs. So we were able to use this technology and get really great visual data just from flying off the coast of these seaside cliffs. So it's a tool, when used right and with stewardship, that we can actually gain a lot of knowledge on the animals that we have minimal knowledge of.
Can you talk about some of the benefits of using drones in the marine science field?
Yeah, so we just received a grant from the American Cetacean Society San Francisco Bay chapter to start training UAS pilots for large whale entanglement response. On both east and west coasts, there are severe issues with large whales getting entangled in crab pots. And basically what we can do with drones is go out there and look and see how the rope is entangled around the whale. So if you can imagine that this animal is foraging and they happen to get this rope that's attached to a bunch of crab pots wrapped in their mouth, and they're trying to get it out of their mouth, and they twirl around, and then this rope wraps around their body, and they're still swimming, and so the rope gets tighter and tighter, and it's pulling like right below their eyes under their mouth, and it literally cuts through their blubber. It can cut off fins. We've seen whales without flukes. It's a very long death. And so with drones, we can go and see how that rope is attached, because usually these animals are under so much stress that getting close to them, you only have one opportunity to make a cut. And so the teams that are out there making the cut, they need the most information. And from that aerial view, we can do that. So that's one incredibly perfect application for drones. But there's also, for marine biology, we can do health condition studies. We can do population counts. We can look at behavior in a way that we've never seen before, because literally sometimes whales will hang out just like 2 meters or just a little bit below the water, and we can't see them from a boat. We can just see like maybe a white fluke or like a little patch of them, but we have no idea. And from the drone, we can see how they're relating to each other and what kind of behavior they might be doing just right below the surface. And that in itself is really interesting when we're looking at juvenile, like the mother humpback whales will travel sometimes with another adult and her baby. And we know that that other adult is useful for when killer whales try to prey on the baby. They will both work together to protect the baby from the killer whale. So being able to see those types of interactions is important. Also, they've collected whale snot with drones to look at health, physiological health of whales. And then recently, Intel used a drone to do polar bear counts. So look at inaccessible habitat and find polar bears to look at the health of the polar bears using drones. And as you know, like polar bears are pretty vicious. So it's kind of difficult to study them in their natural habitat. So being able to see them from a drone perspective, you can see what they're naturally doing. That one picture just shows this polar bear just rolling around taking a nap on the ice, curled up in the snow.
Where are you in the process of developing the best practices for drone use?
We have a document, a draft document, and we are working with NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We're working with a bunch of NGOs like Oceana, World Cetacean Alliance, and many more. And then some California state agencies. We're working with the National Marine Sanctuary, and we're also working with research universities. So basically, all of these people have come together. Oh, and whale watching companies and other industry experts. And basically, we're all coming together and have put our input into the guidelines. And so now what we're trying to do is separate these guidelines out so that they're applicable to the person reading them. So whether you're a whale watching operator or whether you are a recreational pilot that just bought a drone off the shelf. So one thing that we would like to also do with these best practices is look at integrating this into the software. So using AI as a mechanism to work on the software packages. So if there is a large whale in your view, having some sort of AI that would say, okay, this is a large whale, and it reads the policy or best practice that says, okay, you're not allowed to fly over it. You need to stay this many yards away. And so not allowing people to fly over the animal. Or if it's you're flying on the beach and the AI detects that there are seals or sea lions or birds, it indicates to you that you are approaching these types of animals, and having some sort of geofencing so that it can communicate. And I don't know if drone companies are going to be interested, but that's one thing we would like to start talking about. We want people to do the right thing, but then also we want drone companies to help us get there.
What's the next steps?
Well, we have this draft, and what we're doing now is we are taking it on the street. So in November, we're going to host our first 3 seminars. So the gray whales are coming down from Alaska and will be swimming by the California coast. And there's a lot of people flying drones in California. So we want to host seminars to start talking about the best practices. So they're based off of science, and science has told us that we know these certain avoidance behaviors. So we're ready to start sharing the message. And then we're also interested on people signing on as sponsors and to actually do the right practices. So if there's a training facility that wants to sign on, then great.
Are the guidelines available on your website so people can check them out?
We will have those up hopefully by the end of the year. So we're taking that draft document and pulling it apart for specific stakeholders, and should have the best practice document up by the end of the year. for your specific use. So for your recreational pilot, you could go in and see what it is you would need to do for best practices.
Do you have a sense of what the long-term impact would be of integrating drones into the practice of marine biology?
Yeah, so there are so many positive benefits. We know that literally on the West Coast, we had like 50 elephant seals, like 500 gray whales left in their populations. And now those two species have completely recovered. The gray whale is the first animal to ever be taken off of the endangered species list. And with our conservation success means that there are more animals out there. So, and with more people, there's a lot better chance to have these interactions. So we think that, integrating drones will allow us to successfully manage these populations as they increase. And we can look at the habitat change. So if there's beach erosion and seals need beaches to thermoregulate, or if there's sea ice melt, or maybe even sea level rise, we can look at seasonal changes in prey distribution. So we can know that if the anchovies are moving into a certain area, we could contact fishermen to say, whales are right on the trail of this, prey distribution and could be in this area, and start eliminating some of the entanglement that's happening with these whales. And then also it's great for entanglement assistance and response. And then, there's just so many wonderful applications and long-term impact that can really help us better understand the individuals and populations and then overall health and potentially even ecosystem services within our ports and various coastlines.
For whale entanglements, is there an estimate of how many occur each year?
Yes. So over the last 3 years, the whale entanglement numbers have significantly rose in California. So they were like single-digit numbers for many, many, many years. And then over the last 3 years, they've been in double digits. And there were over 100 whales reported last year entangled. 71 of them were confirmed. And so what this means is that we have an entanglement response network that goes out and disentangles whales, but they were only able to respond to 9 entanglements last year because of weather. Finding a whale in the ocean is like finding a needle in the haystack. So if somebody reports a whale entangled and they don't stay with that whale, it's very difficult to find the whale again. So there's more reports, and hopefully in relation to that, there will be more responses to help whales.
Now, AliMoSphere is a startup company. How did it go from idea to actually becoming a company?
I started working to develop a stakeholder group to develop the best practices. And as I ended a fellowship working with California Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, I knew I wanted to continue the exploration of drones and stewardship of drones. So I created the stakeholder group to develop the best practices. And as I started looking at this, I thought we need education and we need training, and it would be great to get more women involved in STEM opportunities. And I had asked a student at Scripps to look at, what's the current status of drones in California. And so my other business partner, Shayna Brody, she went and did this amazing video and research about the current state while I convened this task force. And then we have another business partner, Marty, who is an amazing grant writer and business developer. And the three of us basically have combined to really look at this, at the opportunity for women to get into this space for workforce development. And so we thought, well, we're really into conservation and helping push ocean issues. And then we're also very into helping women grow in their businesses. And this is an opportunity for a lot of women to get involved and either have their own business or just have a fun hobby to do when they're on vacation or at home. And so we want to encourage this development of using drones for conservation and increasing women pilots.
How are you funded? Do you have any partners?
Well, that is a good question, actually. We are a self-funded, self-started company right now. So we really are looking for partnerships funding partnerships to help us get started. We're a designated women-owned small business and can contract with California government, and we can also contract with U.S. government. And then we're looking for opportunities to work in a variety of spaces so that we can conduct some of these projects. So I've had a lot of interest in integrating drones for research as a consultant, but a lot of the NGOs that I'm working with that want to integrate this technology, they don't have a lot of funding. And so we're trying to figure out how do we get more pilots trained to use this equipment. And then we're also trying to figure out how do we fund research. And it's like at Point Blue is interested in the northern fur seal population off the Farallon Islands right by San Francisco. We want to know how many pups are being born each year. And that population is really hard to access. And with drones, we could see how many pups are out there. So we're really interested in finding funding partners that are also interested in the ocean conservation space.
How's that process going?
It's been challenging for us a little bit in some ways because we are still developing what our company mission. I mean, we understand our company mission, but I think the development of how to partner and how to grow this. And so one thing that we would really like to do is partner with other companies that have business ideas on how to market and how to build business plans, because we're all scientists. And so we struggle with that part of our business development.
How are you associated with DART drones?
One of our partners is Oceans Unmanned, and they're an NGO, and I also work as their policy and education director. And what we're doing with DART drones is creating a conservation class, and it's a pathway that if people are interested in going into conservation, they'll be able to take this course and, one, increase their flight skills by understanding the best practices more. So we're integrating that into a course, and I'm contracting with Oceans Unmanned and DART Drone to create that. And I think we'll probably have it up at the beginning of next year sometime, so maybe January or February.
Any other partnerships?
We are also working with Drone Logbook to develop conservation-specific logbooks that would talk about best practices and project planning in ocean conditions. So if there's like an ocean or coastal habitat that you want to fly in, we want to make sure that you have the right protocols ahead of time, and so that while you're project planning, you can integrate that. And then after you complete logs, you could potentially indicate any type of avoidance behavior you saw in any animal that you flew over. And it would be that in itself would be really powerful data for us to have in order to increase the legitimacy of our best practices. So we're hoping that people will be able to use these tools and also go in and describe what they've seen.
Now, you recently spoke at a conference hosted by the Society of Marine Mammalogy in Halifax. Tell us about the conference and what you spoke about.
The Society for Marine Mammalogy is basically an organization for marine mammal scientists and from all over the world. And so there's usually around 4,000 scientists that come to these. This one was a little bit smaller in Halifax. I think 2,000 scientists there. At the conference, I was talking about large whale entanglement, policy objectives that we've secured $100,000 for large whale entanglement volunteers last year and another $2.1 million for stranding and entanglement this year in California. And then also we're gaining speed on getting UAS pilots training to help with those responses. And then I was a co-author on a poster for Shayna's video called Unmanned. And then I was a co-author on the Australia southern right whale work with Frederick Christensen. And then I presented a talk at the Women in Marine Mammal Science workshop and also worked and participated in teaching the science communication workshop.
In your opinion, what's the greatest value that drones can offer to the field of marine science?
The number one thing that drones are going to do for marine biologists, it's going to give them an ability to get out of a manned aircraft. And From a safety point of view, that's really impactful. The number one cause of mortality to biologists is manned aircraft surveys. So the opportunity to do our surveys with the technology that's cheaper, higher quality data, gets us to inaccessible spots and out of the air, like that's really important, is to, protect all of these amazing people that are working in this industry. After my talk at the Marine Mammal Conference, the women that I spoke with afterwards are very interested in how they might be able to integrate it. And then we've had lots of calls from marine mammal scientists that are women working in NGOs or universities on how they can be trained and how they can get their labs trained so that their students are using this technology.
What lessons have you learned about starting a business that you can share with others?
What I've learned so far in this specific business that I'm starting with AliMoSphere is people are really excited, and I've had so much support, and just it's really interesting to see people's eyes light up when I say I'm a scientist who started my own business. And last week being at that conference, it's really humbling and also encouraging to see people who are so willing to help and want to learn more. And so I know I'm in the right place at the right time, and I am hoping that I can deliver the services and products that meet the demand. I know that this is just like on the verge of taking off. And so I think when you have that feeling, go with it and do the best that you can, and know that somewhere along the line, you're probably going to fail in something, but just keep trying and learn from your mistakes and really reach out to what the customer wants and listen to what it is that you're trying to fill the gap for, because literally that's what a business should do, is fill a gap and not create something that's not needed.
What are some of the possibilities for using drones that we haven't talked about?
There are different agencies in California and other states and even globally that are using this for so many applications. Australia is one of the number one countries leading the way in drone applications for ocean conservation. And one of the things they've implemented is these nets that go around beaches so that people can go to the beach without worrying about sharks. But those nets entangle everything. So it kills everything that it comes in contact with. And one of the ways drones is going to be able to help mitigate the bycatch of those nets is using drones to look for sharks. And it's really interesting to see the different applications for our coastlines. Another application is marine debris, and from our watersheds that are coming down from our cities or from our villages is literally a bunch of trash. And so all of that is running out into the ocean. And to be able to use the drone to look for the marine debris is really important. And then you can send people out to go get it safely.
Can you describe what this whole experience has been like for you? Well,
I can say that when you're on the right path, all the doors will open for you. And things aren't hard and they come easily. And when you start falling away from the path you're supposed to be on, things get very difficult and challenging, and it could be difficult to find your path again. But once you get on it, the doors open. And that's kind of how the past couple of years have been for me since I decided to get into marine biology and marine sciences and work with marine mammals specifically and drones. Just the doors just continue to open, and it's really been incredible. And I've met a lot of wonderful people in science and technology and NGOs and whale watching companies, and just all these people are out there really wanting to make a difference, and it's encouraging and inspiring to be a part of that community.
What message would you like to convey to people about marine biology and the use of drones?
I think the one thing I would like to convey to people is that it takes a lot of us, and that you might not think that you have specific skills that are science enough, or that you don't have a technical application to bring to the table. But in general, conservation needs all of us. So we need the people who are in media and can communicate well. We need the people who are in technology. We need the people who just have dreams and want to see good things done for the marine environment. So we need the doers and we need the thinkers. And it takes a whole village to make all of this happen for conservation to be successful. So it's encouraging as far as drone applications, because we can all use drones, and we can all use drones for good and for conservation.
And for those operators that might find themselves flying over conservation areas, what would you like for them to know?
That you're not in the environment alone. And so really the flight planning and the education you get by taking the 107 license is so critical to the way that you fly and the way that you are a steward of this technology, and then going a step further and becoming a steward for the environment. And so looking at the biological components of the environment you're flying in. So are there raptors? Are there birds? Is there a rookery? Is there, a fox den? And literally looking across your environment, and instead of looking at it through your iPad screen, look at the environment and see what you might be impacting before you start your flight, and think consciously of how you're going to do that to reduce any impact to the animals or habitat that they live in.
That's it for episode 132 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed listening to Alicia Amerson of AliMoSphere. I want to thank Alicia for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about AliMoSphere or want to connect with Alicia, check out the website at AliMoSphere.com. That's AliMoSphere.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your
this
support
has been the
means a lot
Drone
to
Radio
me,
Show podcast.
And I hope you'll listen
more
to more
information on today's
episodes of
show
the Drone
can be
Radio
found on
Show
our website
podcast.
at
To hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research.
If you're using drone
For the
technology
Drone Radio
for business,
Show, I'm
fun,
Randy
or
Gores.
research, and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.